Thank you for having me. Can everyone hear me all right?
I can hear you great.
Okay, super. So Michelle said, Molly Rupert-Sullivan. I am MVP in the Copilot space, so obviously I'll be talking specifically about Copilot and about value creation. I have very few slides to go through with you all today. I've taken a very simple approach to this intentionally because I think it ought to be a simple topic that we have kind of made / allowed to be turned into a very complicated space. So kind of similar to sharing in the last discussion, I think that we can kind of bring it back to somewhat basic, somewhat fundamentals, and an approach to change focus and adoption focus and enablement focus, and really make this the people problem that it is, and that will help everyone kind of come to terms with what it is that we're setting out to do. So let me pull up slides for you here. Okay, we seeing slides now?
Yep, see them perfectly.
All right, brilliant. So, told you it was simple, right? So this is my very basic visual for you here. We're, the topic today that I'm going to spend some time on is obviously value creation. But before we get to a point of value creation, I think we have to pull back. And I think this ties in again very well to the conversation that we were just having, because step before value creation is adoption. But before that, we have to start with usage. We have to start with a question of utilization, right? So step one on any journey here to success and value realization with Copilot is getting people to use it, which is, tied up in much of what was just discussed, and is not if you build it, they will come, right? I think that we all recognize that, and that there was maybe an expectation early on that was going to be true, and that hasn't been the way of things. And we could pull that apart and talk about the many reasons why that might be the case. Certainly fear and resistance to change in general, but to job loss specifically with AI has a lot to do with that. But needless to say, we need to hold hands. We need to encourage people to be using the tools in front of them. And we aren't going to get anywhere, certainly not going to progress along this track here, if we can't, first of all, get people using it. And what we need them to do also needs to be a long-term use, right? One-time use is frankly not going to be very important. I was actually just having a conversation with my team here at Guidehouse about our metrics and our use of Copilot, and we were looking at some of the data, and there are pockets of people who either still have not used Copilot at all, or who in the last few months have not used Copilot. And so we were having a discussion about what we might do about that. And the direction that I gave, and the point of view that I shared, was I frankly don't care about those people anymore. We're kind of past the point of use and clicking into the tool as being relevant, really. If you're not doing even that at this point, I have little support to provide anymore. I am more interested at this point in relatively mature organization with how do we convert the people who are using it or who have attempted to use it but have not been successful in their own right in getting to what I would consider adoption, or what we would want to see from a value standpoint. So that's the question that we're looking at. So again, when we talk utilization, this is not a binary yes, no, have they used it ever. That is such a bare minimum that at this point it's not super important. It's how frequently are they using it, which is kind of that turning point then into adoption. And here we want to be looking at what that looks like by organization, at least, possibly by persona, by expectation, fundamentally. So when we start to think adoption, we're thinking you're actually creating habits around use at this point. Right? So that's the key here is we want to create new habits, new ways of working, which, again, not an easy thing to do, not a simple task. We're asking people to create new habits that maybe fly in the face of ways of working for multiple decades. If anyone has tried to break a bad habit before in your personal life, it is not an easy thing to do. So there's a lot of effort to be applied here. And the change in adoption and everything that we were just talking about is all super important. Getting to that place of creating new and reliable and sustainable habits. And only when all of that has happened can we actually talk value realization. So, continuing a little bit, but not getting much more complicated with you on slideware here. What are we trying to do at each of these kind of high-level phases? So the first, we're trying to see what works. There's some element of experimentation here, and we want to know where the promise of value is starting to occur, and where we're seeing champions kind of emerge and we can lean in on that and things like that. What does it take to achieve that kind of the first phase of usage? A lot of that, the communications, providing learning opportunities, enabling people to see what is possible and have them know fundamentally like where to click and what Copilot's capable of, all that good stuff. Policies around responsible use also really important here. We want people to feel secure and safe in it, but also feel that they know what the parameters of use are for them. I can draw special attention to this because I do think it's something that is sometimes brushed off as being, it's a Microsoft tool. You know what you're doing. But this is something that people ask for on a regular basis. They want that guidance. They want a company-specific policy that says this is what we expect from you, and this is what responsible use and correct behavior around AI use looks like for our organization. So I do think that's super important. Security and trust, kind of both sides of the same coin, that they need to be told many, many times that Copilot is safe, that their data is safe, and also that the organization trusts the tool and the organization trusts them to use the tool. Going back to the policies around responsible use. And then sponsorship, which, again, discussed a bit earlier, so I won't go too far into that, but the leadership at this point is super important. Okay, and then what are we measuring? At a utilization phase, we're measuring use, right? How many users and kind of that binary yes, no. And we're also assessing what else they're using. If you're looking just at your Insights dashboard around Copilot, what you're missing is if there are other tools on in the organization. And so we need, again, we'll talk more about the value realization component, but there has to be a tie-in to an overall business strategy, of course. And depending on what that is, will drive what it is your expectations here on our for pure use, right? Individual metrics are okay at this point. I'll come back to why I'm calling that out specifically. Okay? And then progressing into this adoption. Again, this is where we're getting beyond just I've accessed it, I know what it's capable of. I actually have formed a relationship with this. It is part of how I work. It is part of how I will continue to work, right? It is sustainable for me individually and within my team. Here it's important that Copilot's integrated into processes. We need to, using change management type activities as an example, there's a difference here between Molly is using Copilot to draft communications to an actual communications campaign. And every time Somebody
Teams is
is not
stupid.
muted.
Like, I got it running on my phone.
They're muted. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Okay, so where was I? Integration with processes, right? So a shift of individual behavior to, we as a marketing team, we as an internal communications team, whatever it may be, these are the ways in which our process is going to fundamentally change because we are collectively using Copilot. And that takes a team or group level work and look at what's possible with Copilot and what processes can we change because of it, not just at an individual layer. So that's the team coming together to kind of reinvent collectively, and this is important to do if this is an IT-led endeavor, important to do with the business and with the segments where you're looking to see this kind of change, to make sure obviously that it resonates, that it lands, that it's going to be effective, and you're actually improving upon the processes. Transparent goals and measurement. So critical to, again, tie into a strategy overall to set what it is that we are attempting to do with Copilot for value realization and what we are expecting those outcomes to be. The reason I say that all of this can come back to a very simple approach is that at the end of the day, when we were talking about realizing value with Copilot adoption and Copilot integration into the business, the measurement that we are expecting, the KPIs that we should see, are the exact same things we're measuring today. We should not need to introduce any new metrics or any new data sets into the organization. If we are looking to change the outcomes of some group, some department, whatever it might be, what are we measuring them on today? What does success look like for that group? And those same KPIs should be the same things that we are seeing, that we are measuring for Copilot impact, because Copilot should be able to impact positively all of those KPIs, right? So that's why I say that it should be quite simple. The challenge comes from being able to capture that data. And so being transparent with what we're looking at, why we're looking at it. Caveat here being that if as an organization, those sorts of group level, team level metrics on performance are not being captured today, introducing that metric for the purposes of measuring essentially AI adoption becomes very difficult, because that does immediately kind of spark a reaction and concerns about job security. So it has to be done very carefully with sensitivity if that's something new to introduce, and obviously all the better if metrics are pre-existing and we can measure before and after introduction of and subsequent adoption of Copilot. And then crucial that we're tying in to pain points, right? We want to be solving for something that matters. I think that there's still a lot of kind of interest and reaction with a lot of organizations and in the market in general to wanting to just get AI somewhere in the organization. Just kind of, I need AI, I need you to plug it in for me somewhere. And not really tying that into a real why or real resolution to a business challenge. And that obviously needs to happen at a company-wide level from senior leadership, but also needs to be something that the individual employees can connect with as well. This is resolving a pain point for me personally as well, and that's obviously what's going to get me to want to adopt it, want to change my behavior accordingly. So what are we measuring at this point? Measuring frequency of use, right? We're looking for a shift from, yes, I know it's possible, to I am doing work better, faster, stronger because of this. I'm starting to get to a point where I cannot work without it because I have developed such a strong relationship of delegation to the tool, and I'm partnering with AI and therefore want to continue using it frequently, obviously. We're also looking for perception and sentiment, right? That I like using it. I can rely upon the output that I'm getting. I feel like I'm creating of better quality, things like that. Okay. And then I mentioned before I was going to come back to why, the bottom in italics here. So at this point, we individual metrics can be okay, but we really want role-based results. Role-based results specifically, not necessarily usage metrics, right? Again, to the KPIs, OKRs, whatever you want to look at. I want to be looking at the outcomes and be able to see and to say that post Copilot adoption, our outcomes have improved. And that is also really important from a security and confidence standpoint for the employees that you are measuring. Because if we are looking at our collective outcomes, because our collective has improved and been augmented by AI, it's a much more secure and comfortable place for individual employees to be, rather than you saying you're looking at individual performance metrics, which feels like a headcount reduction exercise. So hopefully that nuance is clear. And then moving on to value. So we've adopted, changed habits. How are we actually starting to see an impact, to see an ROI, and to realize the value of this investment? At this point, this is where the custom solutions really come in. And again, anything should be developed in collaboration with the people you actually want to be using things. So if you're off creating agents, don't do it in a vacuum. Engage with people. Make sure that we're solving, again, for real business problems and the alleviation of true pain points. Also be looking forward to long-term solutions and to truly differentiated process solutions. So to put it another way, be wary of making a current not very good process faster with Copilot or with an agent, but instead be improving upon a process and creating it for a future state in which AI is capable of doing a lot of things on our behalf. Baseline data I talked about already, that at this point in the value creation, we have to be able to tie to an outcome, tie to a KPI. So we had to have collected baseline information so that we can show that comparison. And it should be role-based, right? We want to be as nuanced and specific as we can. People very much like to hear not just what's in it for me, but in a very specific way of me, right? I want to hear that you're speaking my language, you're talking about the role that I perform. You're not telling me, Copilot can help you draft the document. I get that. You're telling me exactly the way in which, I, as a recruiter, would use Copilot to create a job description that meets the framework, the template that we use, and how I could then post that in all the right places and use the analysis, etc. Right? We're walking through that whole process in a really specific, connecting way. And then looking at this point for outcomes like time savings, like efficiency gains, but also where are we fully replacing? Where can we take tasks out, take time out, and also where are we improving on quality? So there's better, faster, right? There's also what is net new or improved upon. Are there things we weren't previously capable of because we were restricted by the amount of compute time that something could take, or frankly hours in a day, right? And we're able to do things that we weren't before. So how we're tracking for that. And it really should be measured at this point in a role or departmental way. So we're not looking at individual performance. We are looking at outcomes and what we want from the organization. I'm going to pause for a second. I'll come back to what's on this slide in a minute, but are there questions we want to talk through?
I don't see any questions in the chat. So yeah, you're doing great.
Anyone have anything that's coming to mind? No? Okay, think on it. The two other things I want to add here, and this is the last slide I have for you, is just thinking through kind of the process steps. here. So what are the keys to realizing this, the value? So talk about starting from the strategy perspective, identifying what is a business challenge to solve, which is a very different starting point than where can we put AI within my organization. And then moving from that into target roles, impact areas, right? Based on what I want to achieve, based on the overall strategy that we're setting out for, it would make sense to enable these functions, these roles. It would make sense to create agents that perform X, Y, and Z tasks. So being very strategic and deliberate about it. And then the second component here, that we're going to have KPIs by target role. So we've decided where we're going with this. What can we measure? What do we already collect today, ideally? And then specifically, and tying back into the discussion around the change activities, how do we target that adoption work, that change work, to make sure that we are influencing those things that we have just identified? The maybe oldest adage around change management, that people will do what you measure. So let's tell people what we are measuring. Let's train them accordingly to make sure that we can actually change that behavior, which we have decided we want to see outcomes with. And then subsequently, let's measure again. So again, a fairly simple approach to what has seemed very complicated. I think because it is rather hard work to change hearts and minds and behaviors. But if we can collect the right data and engage in a systematic approach, I think that the value realization is very achievable. Still don't see questions in the chat, but happy to take any or have a discussion broadly about this or the prior topic.
Yeah, I guess I have a question on what do you use to measure? What are some of the things that people are using? I know we've got Viva Insights, we've got the Copilot dashboard. People are creating their engagement surveys. There's multiple ways, but what have, I guess, you seen that's valuable in ways that you are able to measure in a really thoughtful way instead of just binary?
Instead of, what was the end of that?
Instead of just binary.
You said yes. Okay, so I think, it's a combination of all things. The Insights dashboard is helpful for tracking frequency and things like that, and it does allow us to see the shift from use to adoption. Surveys for perception, etc. Then we need to be able to tie it into anything and everything that we measure today. So if we were looking, for instance, at a marketing group, and we want to say that Copilot is want to see how Copilot is able to increase the value created by our marketing division. What are we looking at right now? Is it the number of things that they create and publish out in the world? Is it the click rate that we're seeing, the number of engagements that that we get back? Is it the sales that are generated directly by marketing mechanisms? Is it the time to publication, from idea to publication? Can we decrease that? So it somewhat depends, right, on what it is that who it is that we're looking at. But in any instance, any persona, any role where we think that there's any knowledge work role, it's just a matter of setting out what the existing KPIs, again, what success looks like for that role, and however that is measured today. Does that help, Michelle?
Yep, absolutely. Jason's got a great question. Are you finding that the large language model is effective in being the single place to go for all answers? Or is it becoming more clear that companies may need to develop small language models to be more effective? Which I tend to think of actually as agents. I think of SharePoint agents. Certainly that's really what you're creating when you're creating an agent, is that small language model to be more effective. Love to hear what you think, Molly, on that.
Yeah. I I have not seen what I would say a need to have a small language model. I think that there's, like all things, the data that's available is a huge impact on how well large language model is going to be able to support. And if we're looking at an organization that has just too much information, or hasn't done good kind of data maintenance cleanup, then we lose some of the utility. But I think we're also going to are seeing already the ability of like Copilot memory and things like that, to be able to be more directive, or as Michelle said, for agents. A lot of the advice that I give around things that require that more nuanced response or specificity, that we can achieve that with agents, which I think of as kind of just like putting blinders on Copilot, saying we want you to be really targeted and only look here. So I think that the same things that we might be able to achieve with a small language we can do agentically.
Yep, agreed. I think it's really interesting too, just the number, we, speaking from a Microsoft side, is that there's this vision of, hundreds and thousands agents that companies will create. And I think that you'll find the one that's going to be the most effective for you, especially what matters for your role, right? I have 3 right now that are probably my absolute, must have every day. That I interact with. I use a large language model, uh, using just generally Copilot much broader.
Mhm.
When I want to, almost like I'm prompting my entire workforce as opposed to, a small subset of subject matter experts. So I find like the value of them to be kind of more based on the way I'm working and what I'm wanting to get back. Now, what I do find though, and I'll say this just because I think it's relevant for this conversation, Jason, and everyone, having a large language model is super relevant, but also having your data sources, where you're, could be outside data sources where you're pointing to and really bringing that in. It's been probably more valuable that I've seen, for people who are using in trying to drive adoption, is bringing all the data from their organization into the model or connecting it to the model. So that could be things like Salesforce, or it could be, whatever system of record, to make it more relevant, right? That helps with increasing adoption. I am working with one client now, and they've brought in 4 different connectors so they can have a wider pool of all of their system data instead of just one single source, because they are multi platform type of environment. And Molly, have you seen a lot of that, bringing in different data sources the into the environment?
Yeah, definitely.
Yep, I think that's where I see it be much more valuable.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. Anybody else have any questions? Raise your hand, come off mute. For Molly?
Yeah, even share ways that you're managing, Copilot in your environment and how you're trying to get engagement. I think those stories are also really, really interesting.